Hello, it's Charles Fockaert, October 19, 2018, and I welcome all of you, and I thank you for supporting this channel. And Joe, a little thank you for the coffee. Think about you every time I have a cup of coffee, buddy. Hey, I was in the thrift store the other day. You know, the thrift shop here in town. You know, I'm going to do a whole video on just thrift shops, but that'll be for some other time. But I was in the thrift shop the other day, and you could have these for free, the National Geographic. So I picked up quite a few of them. I got some from 1961, which I'll go into some other time, but I wanted to show you this one. And while I was in there, some guy came in, and I was thinking, I just got done telling the lady that puts all the books up and keeps them all organized and everything, that I said, you know what, no offense, but 99% of these books in here aren't worth, because they're selling their books for a quarter. You can get these, hardback, softback, doesn't make any difference. It's a quarter. And I've seen that. I was up somewhere up north, and they were giving the books away. You don't have to pay. Just take. They're getting so many books in, and they're not worth anything. And some other guy came in right after I said that, and he said, he just spoke out. He must live here. And he said, 99% of these, same thing I said, 99% of these books aren't worth anything. And he got blah blah blah. He was talking, but he was one of those guys that never lets you say a word edgewise, so I didn't want to talk to him. He was talking to this other guy. But so you could get these National Geographics for free. So I picked this up because I was interested in the topic, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what I wanted to show you is that why these books are all worthless is they're either lies, they're propaganda. Clancy is a good example, and I think he got killed. He got murdered because he went off into the truth, so they got rid of him. So a lot of these guys, and I've done videos before where the guy's all slicked up, and he writes this spy thriller that's so real, even though it's fiction. And Iran is a bad guy, and Israel's a good guy, and that's why these guys are so successful, and they get in every library in the country. They get in all the bookstores, and they're promoted, and it's either propaganda, lies, misinformation, and that's why we whites, we Christian Israelites, we Caucasian males and females, that's why we're having such a hard time right now. That's why so many people are brainwashed and programmed. This is National Geographic. I'm resisting the temptation to grab my 1961 edition and show you the difference. I'll do that some other time, but I wanted to show you the truth first, and then we'll look at the lies. If you want to find, they teach you in order to find counterfeit money, or they used to, in order to determine counterfeit money, they just let you handle the real money. That's all you did. You handled the real money, and when the fake money came through, you were able to spot it because you're so used to handling the real money. And so let's look at the truth first, and then let's have a look at the lies, shall we?
The idea that human and chimp DNA overlap by 98 to 99% has been widely used to promote the idea that humans and chimps shared a common ancestor millions of years ago. But have you considered how they came up with this estimate? One of the things that not many people know about this study is that large sections of DNA from both the human and the chimp genome were left out when making this comparison. Let's see how Minute Earth, a secular training site that holds to an evolutionary perspective, describes it.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatched sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
Wow. Ignoring 18% of the chimp genome and 25% of the human genome. That's a lot to ignore. In fact, this represents hundreds of millions in each side of the comparison. Could the sections they left out be responsible for coding most of the obvious differences we see between humans and chimps? The video explains.
And there's another problem. Just as a small tweak in a sentence can alter its meaning entirely, or not at all, a few mutations in DNA sometimes produce big changes in a creature's looks or behavior, whereas other times, lots of mutations make very little difference. So just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are.
It certainly makes sense that just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are. Indeed, human DNA and gene-level comparisons are frequently made to other mammals, such as mice, cows, and even dogs with high levels of overlap. And we are obviously quite different from these animals. The fact is, the human and chimp genomes code for two completely different creatures. While both are mammals based on scientific criteria, God made man in His image and gave him a soul that is eternal. Chimps, which are soulless tree-dwelling animals, and humans, which are eternal souls wrapped in bodies that have vastly different capabilities than all animals, because we were created in God's image and charged to be caretakers over creation, including chimps. Being made in the image of God and charged with taking care over God's creation would mean that humans would have several distinctions from chimps. Let's take a look at just some of them. First, humans are the old.
Now, before we get into National Geographic and black and white, I want a little background here. I've lived in 4 different non-white countries. I've lived in Nicaragua, in the Caribbean there, the blacks in the Caribbean. I've lived in Thailand. I've lived in Qatar. And I've lived in South Korea. I've traveled all over Central America. I've traveled all over Asia and East and Southeast Asia. I think I got a pretty good handle on the differences. I taught for 12 years plus in the schools there. I think I have a pretty good handle on the differences between whites and non-whites from different areas of the world. So no one is this isn't gonna snooker me. I know from personal experience over 12 years that blacks and whites, or whites and non-whites are not the same. So I sure as hell know that whites and chimpanzees are nowhere near the same. So it was very encouraging to find that first clip that explained why they were able to say that 99% of our genomes are the same. Now that may be true for the black race, but that's certainly not true for the white race. So let's go on and look at this. This is how they brainwash and they program us. Black and white. And you'll notice here they put the black on one side and the white on the other side, and trying to confuse you, because this girl here looks blacker than this girl here. But let me tell you, neither one of them are black or white. They're mixed. They're mixed. They're neither black or white. And down here it says, these twin sisters make us. Now, why are you including me in there? they don't make me rethink everything we know about race. You see, they automatically assume that they're right and that their audience, their readers, are going to agree with them. Well, guess what? I don't agree with them. Then we go on. I opened up the article. There's the whole half of this magazine, pretty much or more, is on. Can you see that? Race. And it starts out here in this article on page 29. This is from April 2018. 2018, not too long ago. And skin deep. What is race exactly? Science, and there it is. That's the first mention of science. Science. It's a religion. Science, the religion of science, tells us there is no genetic or scientific basis for it, meaning race. And I get this on this channel all the time. We're not a race. There are no differences in races because these idiots read magazine articles like this from National Geographic, and they wouldn't lie to us, and they wouldn't misinform us, and they've got to be telling the truth because they're scientific. They're scientists. Instead, there's no difference, no genetic or scientific basis for race. Instead, race is largely a made-up label used to define and separate us. Well, that's accurate. Race does define and separate us. Like I said, when I lived overseas, it was natural for the Europeans at lunchtime and even after work to go sit together in their own pubs or sit together at lunch at their own table. They could talk English. They had a common culture. Some were from Europe, but my father is from Belgium. My mother is from Italy, so I'm European. I could sit there and I could talk with other men and women who were from European countries. We had the same culture, the same background, the same religion, be it one form of Christianity or the other. It's a natural thing. I saw it in Nicaragua. When the guests would come to the hotel, they didn't go sit with the Nicaraguans. They sat there in the hotel with each other. I saw it in Thailand. I saw it in Qatar, and I saw it in South Korea. I saw it everywhere I went. I'm not going to go into all this, but the one thing that I did see, I want to mention is that they bring up this fellow named Morton. Samuel Morton, and he was known as the father of scientific racism. And I won't go into all the article; it would take too long. But they say, well, they've been able to refute everything that he says now. Basically, he divides the different races into to separate races because of the skulls. He put he got skulls from all over the world, put shot like from a shotgun inside the skull, and then able to pour those out into a container to see how big the brain was. And based on that and other factors, he came up with a different race. And I just want to read this. Morton thought he'd identified immutable and inherited differences among people, but at that time he was working shortly before Charles Darwin put forth his theory of evolution, and long before the discovery of DNA. See, they just assume that Chucky Darwin was right. And I'm not going to go into that. Chucky Darwin and his theory is a bunch of male cow dung. And the discovery of DNA. See, we've discovered DNA now. So now we know that chimps and man are 99% the same, right? Scientists had no idea how traits were passed on. Researchers who have since looked at people at the genetic level now say that the whole category of race is misconceived. Now remember, researchers, in other words, scientists. See, scientists are infallible. They never make a mistake because they're basing they're basing their conclusions on science, on facts. Never mind that they leave out the facts, right? As we saw in that little clip. Indeed, when scientists, there it is again, set out to assemble blah, 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 blah. They got some guy here, Carl Venter, a pioneer of DNA sequencing, a scientist. He said at a White House ceremony in June 2000, at this, from the results of the Genome Project, quote, the concept of race has no genetic or scientific basis. And then, so the next thing you see when you turn the page on this article is this. The DNA profiles of these two are nearly 99% the same. I'm going to let this stay on there so you can let it sink in. They want you to think that this beautiful white baby here is 99% the same as this tree-dwelling monkey, chimpanzee. And they're you get it? They're lying to you. They're lying to you. The genes of any two humans, of course, are even more alike. Another lie. But after our pre-human ancestors shed most of their body hair, you know, I'm not even going to go. Evolution, folks. And you know what? The whole article is just a bunch of. I had to put it down. I was outside sitting out there and enjoying the warm weather here in Nevada, and I just had to put it down. It's all lies. Let's go have a look at another liar, shall we?
Humans and chimpanzees parted company in evolution about 6 million years ago from a common ancestor. The human genome and the chimpanzee genome have both been completely sequenced, and this is a small section of part of the genome that matches. If we follow along here, human chimp, go all the way along here, all the way along here, they're all identical. Differences between the two are indicated by a little man who is in fact Svante Parbo, a very distinguished Swedish geneticist now working in Germany. It's a little game of find Parbo. Follow along this row here, chimp, human, identical, identical, identical. There's a difference. Walk along, walk along, walk along, all the same, identical, no difference at all between the human and the chimpanzee, exactly the same, exactly the same. Now we see another difference there, A versus G. Walk along, walk along, walk along, and there are no more differences in that whole row. Almost all of the human genome and the chimpanzee genome is identical. A tiny number of differences account for all the really quite large differences that we see between humans and chimpanzees.
Well, there you have it, folks. Mr. Dawkins, he's like the scientist. You know, he's they all bow down and worship to him because he's He's telling them what they want to hear. They don't have to have a God. They don't have to have a creator. They can do what we can do whatever we want to do. Doesn't matter. There's no afterlife. We're just like a monkey. So let's just act like a monkey. Let's act like a chimpanzee. Let's mate with anything that happens to come around. Folks, we're up against a tsunami of lies, and now that particular race, and I do believe they're a race, and you know, a lot of people, and rightly so, think that the fallen angels came down thousands of years before the white race was created, before Adam was created, and had sexual relations, they bred with the creatures, and that in turn resulted in the other non-whites. When Adam was formed, when Adam was created, there was no other race, there was no other being existing that was the same kind. So Adam and Eve came much, much later in the creation, and I'm going to leave that there. I go into that in other videos. It's a hard pill for most people to swallow because Jesus loves everybody. Jesus loves them, yellow, black, green, and white. They are precious in His sight. Doesn't matter. We're all God's creatures. Just put your arms around and co-mingle. Forget kind after kind. That all changed after the resurrection. You can eat pork now. You know, hey, everything's different. Jesus was a little hippie in the Birkenstocks, and we're all the same. So have at it, folks. You can mingle. But there's one little tickler in there for you. The 10 Commandments were not outlawed. They were not done away with at the cross. Thou shalt not commit adultery means thou shalt not race mix. To adulterate something is to mix an inferior product in with the superior product, and that's what that verse, that commandment against adultery is referring to, because the other verse, I think it's commandment number 8, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. That's the one where married couples are to stay married with each other and not commingle, which is what's going on all over. It's breaking up families. We've been inundated with lies. The Judeo-Christian pastors are still telling us lies. They just can't accept the scripture. They got their own image of God. God just loves everybody. He loves everybody. And so, and let the blacks into our country, up there in Missoula. Let the Somalis in. Bring the polio in. Bring all this illness, all this sickness, all this. We got the Hondurans coming in. Hey, let them come in. We're not better than they are, but then why do they want to come to our country? Why do they want to come to the white race countries? Europe, not South Africa. There they want to kill the white race there. Yeah. And you don't hear a word from Trump on that. Trump, one little slinger in here for Trump. He's not one of us, folks. He's just doing what he has to do to keep his supporters going along with the crowd. We're all being heard at 5G. He's pushing 5G. He's finally thinking about putting the military. Go watch my video on what I think about the wall. I could have stopped the invasion coming in on the wall there just like that with a shoot to kill order, and they wouldn't be coming our way. But hey, what do I know? I'm a racist, bigot, hater who's been two strikes right here. Don't forget, I'm on BitChute, and I have CharlesFockaert.com. If I get get the axe here on this channel, I'll still be on BitChute, and I will be on Charles Fockaert, and I will figure out a way to get the word out. By the way, you know what? You got a high school, young man, high school. Why don't you set them down? And I got 500 videos here you could do. Instead of playing them video games and out doing whatever he's doing, sit him down in front of some of these videos and give him a real education. I do have a background in economics. I have traveled extensively. He just might learn something from an old guy like me, and it would be of a hell of a lot more than what he's going to get at that public school he's going to. I want to thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you, TNT there, and I think it's Arkansas near Harrison. And folks, don't give up. Yahweh's going to intervene. We're not going to be able to overcome this by ourselves. 2 Chronicles 7:14. And may the grace of God our Father, the creator of the white race, the Caucasians, who are being marginalized, and they're now openly coming out that they want us all killed or race mixed, so there is no more white race. May his grace be upon us all, for we most certainly need it. See ya.